I'm Sharon Pritchard, the Children's Ministry Advisor for the Diocese of Durham.
And I'm Andy Harris, and I'm the leader of Youth Mission and Ministry.
And welcome to Re-emerging, our conference for today. And we'll be thinking about how we re-emerge back into face-to-face ministry with our children and families and young people.
So we've got a number of videos this morning, and you can choose how you want to watch them. So you can either watch it as one long block, and this morning finishes at 1 o'clock, and we've got two short 15-minute breaks at different points, or you can choose to watch it. You can watch some of it this morning and some of it at a different point. That's completely up to you.
And please do comment. If you're signed into YouTube, you can comment as things are going on.
We're going to start off with some worship. We've just got one song which was done by the Youth Council, and then we're going to go on to Bishop Paul, who's going to be our keynote speaker this morning. Enjoy it.
The greatest day in history. Death is beaten, you have rescued me. Sing it out, Jesus is alive. The empty cross, the empty grave, life eternal, you have won the day. Shout it out, Jesus is alive. He's alive. And oh, happy day, happy day. You wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, happy day. I'll never be the same. Forever I am changed. When I stand in that place, freedom lies meeting face to face. I am yours, Jesus, you are mine. And this joy and perfect peace, perfect day, finally we'll see. Celebrate, Jesus is alive. He's alive. And oh, happy day, happy day. You wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, happy day. I'll never be the same. Forever I am changed. Oh, what a glorious day. What a glorious way. You have saved me. No, what a glorious day. What a glorious name. Oh, what a glorious day. What a glorious way. That you have saved me. No, what a glorious day. What a glorious name. And oh, happy day, happy day. You wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, happy day. I'll never be the oh, happy day, happy day. You wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, happy day. I'll never be the same. Forever I am changed. I'll never be the same.
These past 15 months have been tough for everybody, haven't they? But in some ways, it's children and young people who have had their lives messed around more than anyone else. Think about all they've had to go through school, college, university. For those for whom entry into work for the first time has been really, really difficult. Unemployment amongst young people and young adults is at the highest rates for any group of the population. So it's been tough too in our churches for children and young people. We haven't been able to run the groups. There's been some amazing stuff going on. We've had online messy churches. People have been making some of their Sunday worship suitable for all ages, and some have successfully run groups for children and young people online. But for a lot, that's just not proved okay. And of course, we've not been able to run our parent and toddler groups, our uniformed organisations. All of those things have had to stop. Slowly but surely, we are beginning to get back. So how do we re-emerge well with children and young people? Well, I want to suggest that this is a real chance for a reset, an opportunity to start afresh. In particular, I want to think about churches where we've really rather lost touch with children and young people on a regular basis in our regular worship. That doesn't mean that we've lost touch with children and young people, of course. And it might well be that the reality is expecting them to come on a Sunday is simply not the appropriate way forward at present. So here's some thoughts about resetting. Absolutely get your children and young people's groups up and running again, face to face, wherever you possibly can. Get those parent and toddler groups restarted. Get uniformed organisations up and running as soon as you possibly can. There will be limits, there will be restrictions, but do everything that you can safely so that there's opportunity to play, to discover, to do art and drama and dance and everything else that young children and young people love doing. But here's a possibility, I think, of combining our commitment as a diocese to engage with children and young people and our commitment to care for creation. Perhaps churches that feel at the moment they have no engagement with children and young people on a regular basis could think about teaming up with a local school or schools, probably in September, although conversations this term would make a lot of sense, and think about how church members and school children, whether that be primary or secondary, could engage together in thinking about how best to care for creation where we live. That might include thinking about working on our churchyards as places where people can come to rest, to relax, to pray, to think, but also places where we can encourage wildlife, wildflowers, creatures. It might be that we want to think about how we engage with our local schools in keeping our streets clean, cleaning up parks and streams. I think there's a real opportunity to reset, work with children and young people, and indeed young adults, around the whole business of caring for creation. We have this in common together. We want to care for this world because it's God's world. And at the end of the day, it's our children and young people who are going to be most impacted by climate change and by the failure to care for the environment if we don't all act now. So, take a really good think and look and explore possible ideas. Talk to Sharon and Andy and others about ways in which this might work out. And do it as genuinely equal partners. We who are older need to listen to the children, listen to the young people to discover their ideas, their thoughts, and pursue working with them. And what about talking with them about what they think church is for? So often we might seem irrelevant, distant from their lives, distant from their world. Talk with them about how they might find the space that we have in our church halls, in our church buildings, useful for them. In a recent survey of young people on what were the things they really wanted most to help them, this wasn't a church survey, this was just done among young people more broadly. Their number one choice was a safe space in which to meet and to play, safe space in which to build relationships and friendships and have fun together. Well, we've got safe spaces. We can run them safely. So think, talk, listen. There's a real opportunity here. And take opportunity to go into schools and offer to help schools in whatever way they need. The demands on head teachers and teachers and other school staff has been huge. There must be ways in which we can assist. Of course, we'll have to go through our DBS checks, we'll have to do our safeguarding training, we will place ourselves in the service of the school. It might be to do with gardening, it might be to do with cookery, it might be to do with listening to reading, it might be simply to help escort people out on trips. Whatever, we're here to serve, to bless our communities in Jesus' name. Jesus welcomed children. And when the disciples tried to push them away, he got flaming angry with them because he understood, he recognized that the kingdom of God is for children. And that actually for people like myself and you as adults watching, listening, unless we become like children, we can't enter the kingdom of God. Let's hear Jesus very clearly. Unless you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. We have a calling to give priority to children and young people for the kingdom's sake, out of love for God and out of love for their well-being. So, dear sisters and brothers, thank you for all that you do with children and young people. Thank you for all who've kept things going through the last 15 months. Thank you for those who are beginning to re-engage with stuff in person. Be creative. Find fresh ways of engaging with children and young people. Help them to discover how to worship and how to learn of Jesus. And see them as friends and partners. Do it utterly safely. Always thinking about how is this safe? Because doing it safely is about respecting who they are, respecting them as human beings, valuing them fully. That's what safeguarding's about. So, my sisters and brothers, let's engage with children and young people for their well-being and for ours.
Dear Father, your light does not lose its power like a device that loses its battery and turns itself off. Your light shines to the world. Your light doesn't just shine for one person, it shines for everyone. Your light is a symbol of your love. It is a reminder for us all to always do our best. We are all part of God's family. We love you, God, and we are proud of that. Amen.
It was a busy day for Jesus, talking to all the grown-ups. Then along came the mums, hoping Jesus would bless their babies. "Stop," said the disciples. "What do you think you are doing? Jesus hasn't got time for babies. Sit over there so you won't get in the way." Then along came the girls, running towards Jesus. "Stop," said the disciples. "What do you think you are doing, bothering Jesus? Jesus hasn't got time for girls. Sit down and be quiet while he talks to the grown-ups." Then one of the boys rolled up to meet Jesus. "Stop! What do you think you are doing? Jesus hasn't got time for boys, and he certainly doesn't approve of skateboards. Sit down and be quiet while Jesus talked to the grown-ups." But when Jesus saw what the disciples were doing, he was furious. "What do you think you are doing? Don't stop the children from coming to me. God's kingdom is for the kids. Sit down and watch the children, and you will see how to enter the kingdom of God." Then the mums brought their babies to Jesus, and he hugged the babies and blessed them. Then the girls ran to Jesus, and he hugged the girls and blessed them. Then one of the boys, who wasn't really into hugging, rolled up, and Jesus blessed him as well, because God's kingdom is for the kids.
So the question is, why should children and young people be a priority for us? And the answer is quite simple for me, and that is because they were for Jesus. They are for Jesus. Jesus made them a priority. He invited them into the centre of his world, even when others around him wanted to push them aside and say they weren't important enough. Jesus welcomed them in. In fact, Jesus went one step further than that. He actually said that unless we become like children, we can't enter the kingdom of God. And that tells me that actually we've got a lot to learn from our children and young people, and it's vital that they're included in all our plans and our strategy. We need to meet children and young people where they are, and where they are right now is not in our churches. You know, numbers are dwindling. Our children and young people are not largely in our churches, but they are in our schools, school chaplaincy, and that is why I feel so passionately about school chaplaincy. I think it's just an amazing opportunity to do all of those things that Jesus wants us to do, to draw close to children, to make relationships with them, to meet them where they are, to give them real, true opportunities to meet with him and to discover faith and to learn for themselves. Chaplaincy is all about coming alongside and offering care, support, a listening ear. It's not just supporting a lunchtime club or doing an assembly, but it's about building meaningful relationships with our amazing young people, listening to what they have to say, learning from their example, catching the passion they have for so many different things in the world, and being humble enough to step back and let them step forward. Growing Faith is the vision set by the House of Bishops to ensure a national commitment to achieve a significant culture change within the Church, so that every aspect of mission and ministry is seen through the lens of what it means for ministry with children, young people and households. Growing Faith seeks to bring the three spheres of church, school and households together in how we think and in what we do, with respect to ministry with children and young people to enable their faith to flourish. During our pilot project in Durham, we've worked with 3 primary schools and 2 secondaries. One of our primary schools has been Gainford, and this is a little bit of their story. One of the Growing Faith values talks about connected communities, and this is something that Gainford Primary alongside the church has done really well. There's a really good sense of relationship between Reverend Eileen and the head teacher and other key staff and children at the school. I guess because it's part of a village, there's an added sense of community, and Eileen's been really successful in doing a lot of work within the school, but also in the wider community and bringing people together, which has been really key for Growing Faith. Obviously, initial plans for Growing Faith were made just before the pandemic hit, and things certainly had to change and people had to adapt. Another of the Growing Faith values it talks about imaginative practices and thinking outside the box. And I think Gainford, the partnership there again, has been a brilliant example of thinking outside the box and adapting to the way we had to do things. Lots of videos, lots of messages going backwards and forth between the school, visits that would have normally taken place to places like the Well, again, were done via video messaging to make sure that the children still got that opportunity to think about faith in action. They did learning about Feeding Families charity. They've done Open the Book virtually, which has been fantastic. There'll be some clips of that as well. They've just really sought to maintain that relationship and grow that relationship and look for mutual beneficial opportunities to work together.
It felt special joining Reverend Eileen in the film for collective worship. It brought us all together, even though physically we aren't together.
It makes me want to bless someone by helping when they are said to.
So one of the Faith in Action community outreach projects that I've been a little bit involved in is Crunch Time, which has been a project that's run by the youth group from Gainford Church, but also linking in with a number of schools and people in the community to collect crisp packets and basically to change them into sleeping bags and blankets for the homeless. As we talk to young people and children, they tell us all the time that they want to be involved in the world around them. They want to make a difference. Their faith wants to be an active faith, and this has been a great project, and the kids have been really enthusiastic. Many of you will be familiar or involved with Open the Book, and Gainford continued to do this through lockdown.
The Candlemas online collective worship was a really successful venture where home, school, church and the wider community worked together to inspire and lift one another up during this challenging time, while helping to grow faith in our community.
Again, a fantastic way of maintaining that relationship, the children seeing familiar faces, the children being involved, taking a lead, all brilliant stuff. As a Growing Faith team, when we were pulling resources together for the pilot, we put a big emphasis on handing back power to children and young people, letting them lead, teaching them, giving them the opportunity in real ways to lead and develop and share their ideas. And Gainford again have jumped on this, training some of their children to become collective worship leaders, using resources like Flipping Praise, and again just handing that power back to their children, which has been brilliant. This is a huge part of creating opportunities for children and young people to have spiritual encounters. So this afternoone I'm joined by Reverend Eileen Harrop from Gainford, St Mary's Church, Chris Riley, who is the head teacher at Gainford Primary Church of England. So thank you, ladies. I know you're both really busy, and I know especially today, Chris, you are being the caretaker as well as everybody else in school. And she was telling me earlier that 10 minutes to figure out how to refill the paper towels. But she's got it sussed now. So I really, really appreciate your time. Like I say, I know school life is always manic, but it's probably 10 times as manic as ever at the minute. So really appreciate your time. It was just really to ask you ladies a couple of questions so that people can learn really from your experience and your practice. You were picked obviously as part of our Growing Faith pilot because you already were working well together. We signed up for the pilot, we were all singing, all dancing, we had all these wonderful plans, and then COVID hit. So my first question, just very briefly for you to answer, is how have you kind of coped with the situation with the Growing Faith, the relationship between school and church, and trying to continue to build on that despite all the restrictions? Chris, I'll come to you first.
Right. Well, I think it's basically not seeing those obstacles, but seeing them as challenges, and just being quite creative in our practices, really, looking at different ways of delivering things, to make sure that home and school and the community are still all interlinked, so that partnership kind of strength continues even through lockdown. And I think it was all about good communication. So Reverend Eileen and myself communicated well together. We communicated to the children who were at home and in school, and the families at home, just so that everybody was kind of had the same access to everything that we were sharing in school, but just delivering it and being creative about how we were doing it right throughout the lockdown, really, and rising to the challenge.
Brilliant. I mean, and some obviously we've seen little snippets of some of the material from your Open the Book team, Eileen. Absolutely fantastic. Just great to see an intergenerational thing going on as well, with the children involved and some of the older people. Brilliant. Is there anything you want to kind of add to what Chris has said there?
Yeah, I think Chris, I think we have had a relationship that we have nurtured because we have thought about what is important to the other. And I always asked you, what do you see as being helpful to the school? How do you think we could do things together that would make a difference? And when COVID hit, it hit around just before Easter. It hit just before Holy Week. And one of the first things that we did was to not think that everything was going to stop. And I had asked you, how shall we do our Easter service? Yeah. Because, we weren't going to stop having an Easter service with the school. And so we actually had a recorded, service for the school. and then it was the leavers next as well. Do we do a leaver service? How are we going to do that? And we were determined that we were going to work out how we were going to do this. So I think part of the relationship thing is continuing to develop on the work that we had done together and working out how we're going to continue that. Open the book, goodness gracious me, none of them had done anything online ever before. We never filmed anything before. And they were all interested to see how we could make it. And we even had it open the book by Zoom when we had our full lockdown. I opened the book team, never had Zoom before. I hadn't heard of Zoom before. And they were determined that if we're going to do open the book, even if it's by recording what we're going to do by Zoom and then sending it to the school, we will do that. So,
brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting what you were both saying about the parental engagement has probably been greater through lockdown as well, and you've been reaching obviously a larger audience, and parents and carers have been kind of getting involved in activities at home, and obviously being exposed to faith themselves, which has been really, really good. There's clearly a good partnership there. So this is our re-emerging conference. So I guess we're thinking, we're kind of reflecting on what has been, and now we're kind of hopefully coming out the other side if all goes to plan with the roadmap. So in terms of moving forward and continuing that partnership working, what would you say your hopes are for the future? What would you like to see more of? And I'm thinking particularly some of the stuff around the children leading collective worship and the project that's beginning to sort of move on with that.
Yeah, I think part of it is continuing to foster that discipleship, whether it's through the holiday clubs, whether it's through the prayer spaces. So I think that's really important from our point of view. But also of just making sure that the children's voice is heard in those activities, so that what they've started in school with leading collective worship is then expanded into church services with children helping to lead those. So kind of a continuation of what's gone on within the kind of the confines of the school walls, but making sure we can, even the school is serving the church just as much as the church is serving us, if you like.
Fantastic. I must admit, we've just sat in an hour's meeting, and my head is battered with all the ideas these two have got, and all the services they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And I'm just like, wow, it's fantastic. Though. Thank you so much for your time, and our love and prayers for everything that's going on in the future with you.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you for your support as well.
I was.
Hello and welcome to our conversation here today, talking about youth in the church. I'm joined by Andy, Maya and Susan. I'll give them all sort of a minute to introduce themselves. Andy, do you want to tell us a bit about you?
Yes, hi there. My name is Andy Harris. I'm the leader of Youth Mission and Ministry in Durham Diocese.
Great. Maya?
Yeah, I'm Maya. My mum's a priest. I'm currently worshipping at Holy Trinity Church in Washington, and I've been a Christian pretty much all my life.
Great. Susan?
Hi everyone, I'm Susan White. I'm the Youth and Children's Coordinator at Chesley Street Parish Church. I've been working with young people for about 10 years, but with this church particularly, nearly 5.
Great. And I'm Sam. I'm a member of the Youth Council of Durham Diocese, and I worship at St Nick's in Durham. Maya, why don't you tell us a bit about what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so we're going to do kind of 2 ways. So we're going to ask Andy and Sue some questions, and then vice versa. So we're just going to be talking a little bit about like our experiences in the church, and possibly how we could encourage some more youth, or just any kind of ideas and things we can talk about today.
Susan, do you want to ask our first question?
Certainly. So I'm curious to know why you guys are still members at church and what keeps you going to church.
Well, for me, it's my faith. I'm a Christian, and I think key part of being a Christian is going to church. And so as soon as my faith became my own, I've always wanted to be at church.
Maya?
Yeah, for me, it was like I've kind of been brought up with it all my life, and like from a young age, like it wasn't really my option to go to church, but since I've kind of like aged and kind of matured, it's been my choice. So I decided like to get confirmed, and like now it's just like my faith, and I really enjoy like the Eucharist side of it, and like just like the really like reflective side of it. It's just it's like a good connection, like to be with God and like go to church and things like that.
Have you ever been tempted to leave church?
Yeah, I think at points, definitely. When I was younger, when it was at points it seemed dull, I didn't really want to be there. I mean, we went as a family, so I didn't really have a choice, but sometimes I didn't really want to be there. Also, during lockdown, doing online church, I don't know about everyone else, but it's been pretty hard. And it's not leave church, but not doing it every week just because it was nowhere near the same doing it, watching a recording as it was being there in person.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Sam. Just like it's harder to engage like with like the whole kind of church side of it being online. Like I know it's kind of like the same structures and stuff like that, like music recordings, but it's like it's not the same as being there in person. So I found it really hard to actually like attend the online church. Just because like for me church is about the people as well. Like a great community of like Christians just coming together just at one place and just worshiping the one God. So yeah.
Andy, do you have a question?
Yes. I mean, obviously, when we go into many of our churches in the area, there's not a huge number of young people in a lot of the churches. And I just wonder, how can churches actually be more friendly towards young people, or young people friendly, so that perhaps young people aren't put off going along, or maybe would stay a bit longer?
I think it's really difficult, particularly at the moment, with COVID restrictions and whatnot, because my experience, the best sort of youth groups and things I've been a part of, it's because I've been there with all my mates and been able to have fun, mess around, whatever, as well as obviously being at church and being part of the church youth group. So the fact that that's now really difficult to do because of COVID, I think is really hard. I think one thing for me is having a sort of youth put very much, not at the centre, but near the middle of church life, and children as well, the progression from children to youth. So making sure that there are various children's groups, if possible, and then there's a clear progression from children to youth, and then a progression from youth into the wider church, and possibly having things such as youth-led services to keep people involved.
Oh, brilliant, thank you. Maya, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree, like to possibly like a clearer transition. So I know not every church has enough youth to do like a youth group type, say. So like maybe looking at like how different communities can come together. Maybe if there's like a couple of youth in different churches about, maybe they could come together like once a month for like a film and games night and a little bit of Bible study or something like that, just so they've got something. Because I know there's quite a few churches that don't necessarily have enough youth to actually create a youth group. And if it was, there'd be like different age ranges. So maybe from like 13 to 19, like, so yeah, just kind of more like engaging kind of activities.
I completely agree with Maya. I think another thing, I think having youth workers at the church is obviously a great thing, and them being people that youth feel they can talk to and be, spend time with, and have as well as being part of a youth group, being part of one-to-one stuff with them, particularly if you don't have that many youth. I've been at churches where I'm the older youth and there are some younger youth. I've been at youth group and it's sort of people only 2-3 years below you. People change a lot over that time, so it can feel quite odd, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Is it important, do you think, to have things where the whole church meets together, like sort of young people, older people? Do you think that's important in this conversation? Maya, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. Like, I know my church does like a yearly picnic. So like they get together outside, have loads of games, barbecues. It's like great fun. I think it's good because then like it's not like adults and then the youth. So it's like they're kind of seen as like equals. Because I know that can be hard in some churches where the youth are seen as like they don't really have a voice. And I know that's kind of like not ideal, but I think if we had more kind of like separate age groups like mixing together, they might see like we actually do have things to say and suggestions possibly.
Can I ask a question? I'm just wondering then, if what would it look like? What would church look like for you if youth and young people were put at the centre of the mission of church?
I think that's a really interesting question, because it's really hard to put, a currently quite a small demographic at the centre of something. I think that just having youth workers who have a clear mission and aren't, because lots of youth workers I know are really overworked, just they've got so much on, and actually having more time to do stuff, and also having youth and young people and then children involved in the services as much as possible, whether it's the children come and feedback from the children's group they've gone out to, or the youth are part of the band, or the youth are leading the service, and just things like that. I find really means that people can see that, we value youth, this church values youth, and we like having youth as part of our church. We really think they're important.
Thank you.
That's amazing, you two. Thank you so much for that.
So we've just got a question for the youth leaders now. So why is it important to keep young people engaged in the church?
Sue, do you want to go first?
I knew you were going to do that, Andy. For me, having a broad age range at church just brings something quite special to the church. It enhances who we are and what we offer as churches and communities. And I think the fact that faith can be something that young people can grasp and something that kids can grasp, and then they have that continued kind of influence right up to adulthood, is really important for me. And I want to see churches promote it more, put it front and centre more, and just engage with young people as much as they possibly can.
I think it's about survival as well. I think if there aren't young people, I don't just mean sort of children and youth, but if there aren't young people in our churches, then our churches will not survive. And as Sue says, I don't think you can have proper church without all ages represented. And young people like yourselves bring so much to a church. You bring your gifts, you bring your passions. So I think it actually helps churches to reflect on who they are and their mission to everybody, and their welcome and hospitality to all people. So absolutely important that churches have young people right at the heart of what they do.
Yeah. I think young people can breathe life into a church as well, can't they? Because they come from a completely different perspective, so they keep me young. So I quite like that.
Yes.
I mean, how do you think churches might start to re-engage people as we come out of sort of COVID life and all the lockdowns? Andy?
I think, it's a really good question, because a lot of churches have struggled over COVID particularly. And a a lot of people have lost contact, maybe with everybody, but certainly with some people that they were engaged with before. And I think it's really important that this is the whole church that does this. It's not just like the youth leaders or the youth team that has the responsibility of re-engaging. It needs to be the whole church that does this. And Maya, you were saying before about doing things for the whole church family. But yeah, getting people together for picnics and barbecues and those sort of things where people can mix, and also you can actually sort of invite people to. I mean, particularly if you've sort of lost contact with people, having something to invite people back to that's not just your ordinary weekly youth group, which could be quite hard for people to come back to, but have some sort of party.
I think I totally agree, Andy. I think re-engagement is difficult. I felt really disconnected from my young people this year. And I think it got to a point where people were just disconnecting with Zoom or anything that was offered as online content. And I think to be able to get back to a point of where we were, we'll have to be imaginative and put the work in as well. So for me, a lot of my work is in schools, so finding creative ways to re-engage with schools in ways that are safe for the moment, because their rules are very different to some of the rules we might come across. So yeah, I think we've got to put some effort in, like you say, and if that's come up with creative things for young people or children to engage with, then that's great.
I think it's an advantage coming into the summer. And I think there's a lot more opportunities to do things sort of outdoors. I know here in Shildon, where we are, we've got no young people here at the moment at all. But I've contacted all the 3 primary schools, and we're doing gardening projects with all of the 3 years, with year 6s in all the schools. And there's no leavers service this year. A lot of churches, a lot of schools have always been part of the leaver service in the cathedral. It's all online. But there might be the opportunity of doing things, inviting year 6s into the local church to have some sort of leaver service within the church. So yeah, just sort of working out connections. But I like that idea, Sue, about being imaginative about.
We'll have to be, don't we? Yeah, things are different, and we'll just have to accept that they're going to be different for this year, and we've got to work out how we can do things that we want to do and connect in ways that are special and faith-filled, spirit-filled ways of engagement. We just have to get imaginative.
Yeah, completely agree with what you've said.
Have you two got any ideas about how churches could re-engage?
Yeah, I think what you've said about being imaginative is great, and you know, it's summer, we can get outside, barbecues, picnics, those kind of things. I think also it's balancing between getting, as Andy said, connecting with the year 6s and the people who, you know, and getting involved with communities, and also trying to balance between finding youth who potentially stopped engaging with things over COVID, because speaking for people, you know, my experience, people I know, people really just aren't that interested in coming back. They're just a bit, just because it's not that they disliked it, it's just that now it's stopped, they don't feel the need to start it. Now that they got bored of doing it on Zoom, probably with good reason, and then everyone got bored on Zoom, and now getting people to come back is probably harder than getting people to come in the first place.
But I think that speaks volumes for how everyone feels.
Yeah.
I don't think that's just a young person feeling. I think knowing that there's been long periods of time where we've connected with church online, and you still feel like you've got a connection, but it's really different. So having to find new ways to connect and feel like you've still got that influence of church in your life is difficult. So I don't think that's necessarily just a young person thing. So that's why I'm saying we'll have to work hard, don't we, to reconnect with people and find, and just be gentle with people and just meet them where they're at right now, and accept that things aren't going to be the same for a bit.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
I think as well it might be hard for some people like returning because it's still kind of like the social distancing restrictions in church, and like church is about like kind of hugging people and like singing, and I know singing is a big part of it for some people. And it's like their kind of like best way of expressing worship. But yeah, I think when it gets back to normal, like as much as it can be, I think that'll be when probably people who probably didn't want to return might start looking at coming back. So I think that'll be the point where we need to like encourage and just like advertise as much as possible.
I think giving them a sense of value as well, making sure that the young people are valued. So even if it's not about young people coming into the church, or in our case, into the parish centre or groups or things like that, just getting in contact and just reconnecting that way. For me, that would be sort of getting back into school, even if it's not doing what I was doing before in school, but just chatting, hanging out and having conversations, and just making sure that actually that they're doing okay, and just asking how they're doing. So I think that's really important that we do that too.
You've both mentioned voice, the importance of young people's voice, but use your voice at this time. And I mean, it's not for the church leaders to be thinking, oh, what can we do for young people? It's actually we're church together, and sort of for young people to actually to be thinking and praying about what they want to see and how they want church to look like. It's a good opportunity, this, to actually to do things a bit differently, and to not just to go back and do things exactly the way that we've always been doing.
Well, thank you very much, Andy, Maya, Susie. It's been great chatting with all of you, and I really hope what we've said can help some people out there watching this.